'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. I'm at the park again this morning. It's a little overcast, a little muggy. We're going to be pretty hot here today here in Grand Rapids. It's already 74 degrees, which isn't too bad. Man, I'm actually at the doggo and I are at another new park. I love it when there's like hardly anybody here, so I can, because I always get afraid that I'm going to be interrupted by morons who say that I'm wrong and I'm an asshole. And man, it's like, it's also the reason why I don't do my podcast at home, sadly, because my dad can be such an idiot sometimes when it comes to politics. And yeah, he was on the rampage about how wonderful Trump is, and he really wanted to hear some of the stuff that he said in his speech. Yeah, he did. And I'm like, he was bombed. Yeah, he bombed at his correspondence dinner. It's like, dude, nobody likes you. Get over it. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he's Mr. Yeah, he thinks that he should be the only person on earth who should be funny. And he as hell ain't. So, there you go. Okay, time to round up the victims for today's Bee-otches of the day. First things first, Gretchen Whitmer. Big Gretch. So, I've always had a love-hate relationship with Big Gretch. Of course, she's our governor here in Michigan. She's a Democrat, but sadly, she's a corporate Democrat. She got elected because of her pet scene, which is fix the damn roads. Michigan has the worst roads here in America. But sadly, she did a lot of good things as governor. Don't get me wrong. Number one, there's a lot of road fixing projects that, hold on 1 second here. Note to self, start bringing some water with me. So the story is, she got the state back to being a union state again. Of course, Rick Snyder made this into a right-to-work state because, he was purchased by the DeVos family. And then what happened was, and not only that, she basically spent her time, and not only that, I respect the fact that she, unlike so many other governors here in America, she was tough on COVID. She made sure that restaurants stayed closed and movie theaters stayed closed and non-essential businesses stayed closed. So, and some people are like, well, she hurt businesses. Well, yeah, COVID doesn't exist. It's all a lie. It's a hoax. Okay, prove it. Folks, people need to know that COVID-19 is real. It's a real disease. I'm angry that our government is no longer giving everybody a COVID vaccine because, we have an anti-vaxxer running the CDC. And, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's anti-vax, and he believes that vaccines actually do more harm than good. Bullshit. And of course, it's sickening that, you hear about this stupid virus where you eat lettuce and then you spend 12 hours on the shitter. And, it was all linked to this company called Taylor Farms. Yeah, Taylor is now hurting big time. Turns out that the lettuce they get is all from central Mexico. And down there, all the lettuce pickers, they work long shifts, low pay, and they don't get bathroom breaks, so they piss and shit everywhere. And that's what's causing this virus. And this lettuce is being shipped to Taco Bell. And I'll bet you they're struggling too. Yeah, I saw that Taylor does bag their own lettuce to sell at grocery stores. And the story is with Taylor is that now nobody's buying their lettuce. People see the word Taylor Farms and it's like, ugh, get that shit away from me. So, and it turns out that the guy who heads Taylor Farms sadly is a Republican, and a MAGA supporter, which doesn't shock me one iota. So, fuck him in his company, get your lettuce elsewhere. So, anyway, so getting back to Big Gretch, but she did a lot of bad shit. She did, she raised the cannabis tax here in Michigan to 24%. And it's like, no, you need to tax the wealthy, tax the DeVos family, tax the Ellisons, tax those people. They have the money. We don't. And not only that, so this is why I'm giving her the Bee-otch of the day. She's made a giant mistake. And that mistake is the fact that she just endorsed Hayley Stevens for senator. Not Abdul El Sayed. Nope, can't do that because he's too far to the left for me. Because, he's going to kill the health insurance industry. And that's how Gretchen made her money. Her father was he was an executive for Blue Cross Blue Shield back when she was a little girl. And now, and sadly and unfortunately, she wants, it's like now Stevens is gaining the endorsement of so many people who are not true, who are basically corporate Democrats. People like former Senator Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters, the man that she's trying to replace as senator, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, all these corporate Democrats. And what's pathetic is that she is supporting of Israel. Yesterday driving through Grand Rapids, I did pass a gas station. It was the Marathon at 44th and Stauffer in Kentwood. That sumbitch was $4.49 per gallon. $4.49 a gallon. Now, most gas stations are hovering around $4.09 a gallon, but still, this is sad. We're paying so much money in gas due to the fact that we've decided that instead of, helping them, having a president that would help Americans, he's helping himself and his investors with tariffs. He's threatening to tariff Mexico, Canada because of the wildfires. He wants to tariff. Yeah, he wants to tariff Canada. He wants to keep on. It's like he says that the war in Iran is over. No, it's not over. I mean, we're still blowing each other up, and and this is sickening, folks. And I'm just hoping. Just this morning alone on TV, it's like I saw an attack ad on Abdul back to back with an ad for Hayley. These people are socking more money into Hayley than to Abdul. And Abdul, he's decided that the only people who should support him are the people. And they're all crying. Well, and then the other side's crying, well, Abdul's a millionaire. Oh, he made $600,000 last year. And Hayley's crying, I'm not a millionaire. And meanwhile, here she is on social media, all drunk at a party for AIPAC, when she makes a speech, she sounds like Chris Farley as his Man Down by the River, Matt Foley character on SNL. This is what we get, folks, if we elect this cunt into the Senate. And I hope it does not happen. Tragically, if, I hate to say it, I might have to vote for her if she wins against Abdul. I'll be angry, but it's going to be a vote of reluctance because because the other guy, the Republican, he's a maggot. He's a MAGA guy. I don't want MAGA more MAGA from our state. But here, I've been wanting to talk about something that really has bothered me about Whitmer for a long, long time. And so here's the story, folks. Several years ago, she elected a woman to the Michigan State Housing Development Authority statewide housing partnership. A woman named Nikki Devitt. And Nikki's husband, Tom, is he is a bully. Tom Devitt was a failed radio personality here up in northern Michigan. He worked at, back in the 90s, he was the morning guy at a station called The Zone, which was a really shitty alternative rock station. The station tanked in the ratings and he got fired. And then Tom ended up moving to Caro, which is a small town in Michigan's thumb, about, I think, 2,000 people or so. They had a little radio station there, WIDL, and it was a soccer mom station. And he was one of the very few people who were actual local voices on that station. And Tom loved to bully people online on the Michigan Radio and TV Buzzboard, where I posted on. I exposed Tom as a loser for saying, "Wow, you went from northern Michigan to to the shithole thumb? Wow." So basically, Tom got mad at me, and he wanted to go down on people who judged him big time. Instead of being the coolest DJ in the world, he decided. So this is what happened. He convinced other members of the Buzzboard to hate on me, and the Buzzboard used to have something called Meeting of the Minds, where people who were regular posters were allowed to meet in person. I was not invited to the third installment because one of the posters on there, he's TC Talks, aka Peter Strong or Peter Starkle. He goes by both names. He's the morning guy at WNMC in Traverse City. He simply said, "Yeah, there's some people who don't want to talk to you in person. And they say it's because of your politics. It's because of what you post on your website." And it turns out one of them was Tom. And Tom, he and a few other folks on the Buzzboard, I assume, were behind this character Dale Motel, and they were all after me. And not only that, another reason I hate Tom a lot was that he was buddies and co-workers with an extended member of my family. So I would imagine there was a lot of talking behind my back between me and him. Well, anyway, I quit the Buzzboard. Tom, at the time, was at WMKC, Big Country 102.9. He was also at the Bear. He pulled a double shift there. And Tom struck again. So what happened so anyway, after I quit the Buzzboard, Tom ended up at KLT doing afternoons there. The afternoon show they had called The Trainwreck moved to mornings because they fired Omelette and Finster. Finster went first, and then Omelette went because, the Gokey family, they were notorious cheapskates. They wanted to run KLT as cheaply as possible, and it showed. So, anyway, long story short, Tom ended up doing afternoons at KLT. At the same time, Smitty was doing afternoons at Rock 105 and 95.5. He did the afternoon hangover over there. And Smitty would occasionally attack KLT live on the air and say, yeah, Tom, we worked together, me and Tom. Tom was a piece of shit human being. He was, part of the reason why he lost so many jobs in radio, whether it be the Zone or WIDL or Big Country or the Bear, he lost those jobs because he was an asshole. Nobody liked to work with him. And then what happened was Tom ended up, so this is what ended up happening to Tom. So one day, Smitty talked about how Tom was stealing his material. He had a segment called The Sack. And The Sack was a segment where Smitty, Tom would play a song that wasn't played on the air in a long time. Well, Smitty had his own feature called The Box. And it was a song that wasn't played, also not played on the air for a long time. But here's the thing. Tom had been stealing a lot of content from Smitty. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Gokies were prepping to sell the stations, which were KLT, the Fox, and ESPN up north, to the Coyne family, Jerry and Cheryl, who own ESPN up north. And of course they owned ESPN up north, 106.7 and 105.5, and the Fox, which was a classic hit station. And long story short, the Gokies wanted too much money. They wanted like $9 million from the Coynes. The Coynes did not have any of that money. So they balked on the deal, and they were sitting on an LMA, local marketing agreement. They were operating the stations for a while. So what happened was while they were running KLT, they decided to screw over Smitty by getting him fired at Rock 105 and 95.5. So they found this bit that Smitty did on his personal page and the song. And so Smitty was playing this opera song where a woman was singing, "You're a cunt, you're a cunt, you're a motherfucking cunt," over and over again. And it was more of a comedy bit, but he never played it on the air because it was, you can't say cunt on the air. It's a Carlin word. So this is what they did. They edited everything together to make it sound like it was on the air. They shipped it out to Rock 105 and 95.5 sponsors. And they, in the email, said, "This is what happens every afternoon on Smitty's show." So what happened was, instantly, they lost $40,000. So, as a result of what the Coynes and Tom Devitt did, they decided, so this is what happened. So the Coynes and Tom, so this is what happened. Blah, Black Diamond, the owners of Rock 105.955, they also have the Bear and Big Country, big radio group in northern Michigan, they basically told Smitty, look, you're a good worker, you bust your ass every day, we like you, but we got to fire you because we got to tell the advertisers, look, this will never happen again, and the only way we can do it is get rid of you. So Smitty left radio. So he left the radio. Not only did he leave Rock 105.955, he left the radio business for a while. And so word got around Traverse City and northern Michigan about what Tom did. And here was Tom all happy that he had beaten, Rock 105.955, and, it was sad. I felt really terrible for Smitty because of what Tom did. Tom was always a fuck up. He was a guy who did not deserve to work in radio. He screwed me over. He screwed a lot of people over. And now he screwed Smitty over. And so this is what ended up happening. The good news, though, was that Black Diamond talked to the advertisers. They knew that the coins were, basically they were on the pot but not shitting, and, it turned out that they had a bad reputation. And then what happened was, as a matter of fact, Jerry Coyne actually had me call him, and he was crying that, well, we would never do anything like that. And that truth was that what Smitty did by bashing Tom Devitt is unacceptable in the world of broadcasting. And my wife, Cheryl, is a board member of the Michigan Lottery. So as a result, we had to do what we had to do. We had to work, tell advertisers that this is not normal behavior among DJs. So while he was telling me all this shit about basically defending Tom and trashing Smitty, I was thinking to myself, Howard Stern made himself a star by trashing the competition. Look at what he did over the years. He trashed John DeBella in Philadelphia. He trashed Mark and Brian in Los Angeles. Mancow in Chicago. Bob and Tom in Indianapolis. He trashed all those fuckers because they sucked. They had no talent. They ripped Howard off. And that's what Tom was doing. He was a clone. He was a turd and a half with no talent. So anyway, I basically caught Jerry in all those lies. I mean, this is the same guy. You got to remember that Jerry is also butt buddies with Ted Nugent. He's buddies with Ted Nugent, who is a child molester, and was even on his TV show several months ago. Yeah, Ted has a TV show on a digital streaming service called Real America's Voice, which is a channel that is so far to the right that they make Fox News look like CBS during the days of Cronkite, I heard. So, anyway, what happened was, at the end of the day, the coins balked on the deal. They abandoned their LMA when it ran out. They entered into a deal with Roy Henderson and WLDR. They operated that turkey for a few months, and then they got sued, and there was a lawsuit between, it was Henderson Yeah, I think what happened was Roy Henderson tried to sue them. It was because they caught Henderson in a lie because of the fact that he did not properly maintenance 99.3 FM, and yeah, they put the 99.3 repeater on their transmitter in Traverse City, and yeah, that's part of the reason why Henderson stations are never on the air. It's because Henderson and the Coins do not get along. I mean, at least they have some redeeming quality, but still, they screwed over Smitty. And while Smitty was off the air, he became a bartender. And you learned that being a bartender pays better than radio. So that's what happened at the end of the day. Roy Henderson, Smitty became a bartender, and because it paid way, way better than being a DJ. So he quit the business. There's far less drama in being a bartender than working behind a microphone, unfortunately. So, but anyway, guess who ended up with the last laugh? It was Smitty. Because then what happened was Tom got fired from KLT because Midwestern Broadcasting, WTCM, WCCW, Z93, etc., bought KLT out. Because, the Gokies had to sell their stations one by one because no group wanted them. Because nobody has money anymore, obviously, in radio. They ended up getting $2.2 million at the end, with the dust cleared. And KLT ended up in the hands of Midwestern. And one of the first things that they do when they bought the station, they fired Tom Devitt. They knew that Tom was an asshole, and they knew how to make the station number one without Tom. And guess what? They did it. They brought back Omelette and Finster. The station has and what's funny is that KLT, they're number one in the ratings, while Rock 105.955, without Smitty, they're dead. They call themselves an active rock station, and yet they're the type of station that doesn't add a certain song to the lineup until, after it peaks in the charts. Yeah, that station is a joke. Yeah, sorry to break it to you, but Cartman is a shitty PD, in my opinion. So anyway, last I checked, Tom Devitt was now working as he works as a postman in Harbor Springs. Now, I have nothing against mailmen. My grandfather was a mailman. But Harbor Springs is a shitty town. Harbor Springs is a town where, ever watch the episode of Yellowstone where Monica, who is Casey's wife, goes into a clothing store and is harassed by the owner, claiming that she was a crook and was shoplifting? And so she ends up having to strip naked and all that shit. Well, guess what happened? Then came Beth. Beth came over and started trashing the place. And had to tell her, the storekeeper, the woman who owned it, that she was a racist. Yeah, that's Harbor Springs if you're a black person. Not only that, Harbor Springs is a town that's famous, speaking of Native Americans, for having these Native American schools run by the Catholics and religious groups from way back in the day, and they decide, we're gonna whitewash these people. I fucking hate religion. We'll get to more about religion in a moment, but that's Harbor Springs for you folks. This is a city that judges, because it's always been hoity-toity, rich, whitey people. So that's another reason to hate Gretchen Whitmer, unfortunately. I love her, but those are a list of her weaknesses. And that was a big one. So anyway, speaking of Hayley Stevens, she's getting Bee-otch of the day today too. So it was revealed that Hayley is paying people on social media to say that they're supporters of her. And so the story is, there was a DJ at WKFR in Kalamazoo. He did a video on that trashed Hayley. And in this video, he showed this woman who called herself Ivy from Michigan. And she was like, oh, I'm going for Hayley Stevens. She knows what she's doing. And it turns out this Ivy from Michigan, she's actually from California. And it's lies. So then what happened was the DJ tried to contact her, and every time she did, he got blocked. Hayley and her APAC sycophants are all paying to get her elected. She's a bought and sold candidate, whereas Abdul El-Sayed is relying on actual people to help him. Just $5. And, it breaks my heart that these people want to get her elected. And, she's a hardcore centralist. She's in bed with Israel. And Israel is the reason why gas prices are so high. Because Trump's in bed with these assholes. And now Trump is a war criminal. And so is Netanyahu. They need to be taken to The Hague and tried for war crimes. It breaks my heart that there's now two types of Democrats. The Democrats who actually care about Americans and the Democrats who are posers. It's the way it's always been. It's a big tent party, folks. And, if, the small guy loses and the big guy personally wins, George Carlin is right. It's one big party and you ain't in it. It's a giant club and you ain't in it. And that's what it is. Okay. Another Bee-otch of the day this week. The Ellisons. Good news. The Ellisons are not going to go ahead with the Warner Brothers and Paramount merger until next year, because a judge has rejected the merger for now, but 17 attorneys general from 17 states, obviously, have all said, can't do. It's going to create a monopoly. They're right. So here's the story. During Trump's first term in office, 20th Century Fox was sold from Rupert Murdoch and the Fox News Corporation. They were all sold to Disney. And so what happened is that now the studio that used to be 20th Century Fox is now 20th Century Studios, and they're basically an in-name only company of Disney. And that Disney has had a long history of having a lot of nameplates. Like, for an example, they used to have, of course, you have Walt Disney Pictures. But then there's, they started this company called Touchstone back in the 80s because they wanted to produce films that weren't necessarily family films. And they had Hollywood Pictures as well. So now they have 20th Century. It used to be 20th Century Fox, of course. Murdoch's kept the Fox name for their channels and their entertainment companies. Of course, 20th Century Fox itself started because of a merger in 1935. The studio, the company was formed by a guy named Darryl F. Zanuck. He bought the Fox Film Corporation from bankruptcy, actually. Fox Film Corporation was struggling for many years. Fox was Robin Quivers a couple of years ago said, there's no guy named Fox. Well, there was. William Fox was his name, and I did some research on him, and he was an asshole. And the story was, he was born in Hungary. His real name was Wilhelm Fuchs, Fuchs. And he formed Fox Film Corporation in 1915. And so the story was, in the late 1920s, 1929, his company was, tried to merge with MGM. The merger never happened. Louis B. Mayer said no to the merger. It was supposed to be kind of a hostile takeover. Never happened. So what happened at the end of the day was that Rupert Murdoch, actually not Rupert Murdoch, but Fox then got into a car accident, and the Great Depression began. The big stock market crash in 1929 happened, and at the end of the day, he lost everything. So, long story short, 20th Century Fox merged because of all this. Because Fox had a strong distribution system, and 20th Century was using United Artists in the beginning. So, anyway. So, at the end of the day, 20th Century Fox was formed because of that. Now, it ain't 20th Century Fox anymore. It's 20th Century Studios. And they also own the old film library as well. So, Disney now owns the old film library, excuse me. So, that was going to happen with Warner Brothers and Paramount. They were going to merge. $110 billion merger. A lot of people losing their jobs. That would have meant a CNN and CBS merger from the news department. Barry Weiss would have run both companies into the ground. And, CBS Evening News, they're dead last in the ratings. Holy crap. So, but anyway, another big news, speaking of CBS, so a lot of big news this week in the world of broadcasting in terms of TV stations. So it's been announced that Nexstar will be losing 6 CBS affiliates. So here's what's going on. They inked a deal with 2 companies, Hearst and Forum Communications. Forum is way up in the Dakotas. So here's what's going on. Jackson, Mississippi, WJTV, longtime CBS affiliate. CBS is moving to WAPT, Channel 16. WRQE in Albuquerque. CBS is moving to KOAT. WSPA Spartanburg. CBS is moving to WYFF, which is NBC there. KXMB Bismarck. KBMI is going to be the new affiliate. KCLO Rapid City. WMBN will pick it up. Of course, all these stations are going to be on .2s, by the way, of their regular channel number. Like, for an example, WAPT is on channel 16. 16.1 will stay ABC. 16.2 will be CBS. KOET is ABC. 7.2. So on and so on. So, but here's something that really has piqued my interest. So, Birmingham, Alabama, WIAT, Channel 42, will be dropping CBS after 60 years, over 60 years, and it's going to be moving to WVTM. Very, very interesting story. So here's what happened. Back in the early 60s, Birmingham, Alabama, very large city, only had 2 TV stations. Channel 6 WBRC, which was owned by the Storer Broadcasting Company. And then you had Channel 13, WAPI, which was NBC. Both stations shoehorned shows in from ABC. Well, then what happened was Storer sold Channel 6. Storer actually sold the station. Storer sold Channel 6 to, I think she needs water, unfortunately, and I don't see a bowl anywhere. Oh, my baby. Yeah, I'm in a part of the park where there's no water, sadly. Maybe we'll have to head towards the car. So pardon the echo. So here's the story. So here's the story. So Channel 6 in Birmingham, that was WBRC, it was CBS. Channel 6 was sold from the Storer Broadcasting Company to the Taft Broadcasting Company. The owner, Taft, was an executive at ABC. He was on the board of directors, and ABC told him, please make Channel 6 ABC full-time, because back in the olden days, ABC was the red-headed stepchild of broadcasting. They had very few affiliates. Full-time affiliates. In most of the rural towns where there were an ABC affiliate, well, guess what? They had to shoehorn, they were on a secondary basis, meaning that they cherry-picked all the shows they wanted to carry. So this is what happened. So this is what ended up happening. So ABC made a deal with Channel 6, WBRC, and the Taft Broadcasting Company to become a full-time affiliate. CBS, on the other hand, was now homeless in Birmingham. So they went to Channel 13, WAPI TV, and they made a deal that they would carry some shows from both networks. So here's the story. Channel 13 agreed to remain an NBC affiliate, but they would also cherry pick shows from CBS. And they also agreed to extend prime time to 11 o'clock from 10 o'clock, because it was a central time zone. So people in Birmingham can watch the more popular shows from both networks. Now, the good news was people in Birmingham, so that way they created this 1-2 punch against Channel 6, which was ABC, and ABC, like I said, wasn't much of a network back then. Well, so then, here's more to the story. Channel 13 had to reject a lot of shows from both networks. They rejected The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. They rejected from CBS the Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And they even rejected the Ed Sullivan Show. And why they rejected Sullivan? Well, I'll tell you why, folks. It was because Sullivan had a ton of black guests. He did not want them colored folks. They did not want colored people on their station. So what happened at the end of the day was, so anyway, as a result, in 1964, if you wanted to watch the debut of the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, well, guess what happened? It didn't happen. In Birmingham, people had to miss out because 13 would not carry Sullivan because they thought the show was too black. Yeah, because Sullivan had a lot of black people on his show. Yeah, they even talked about it in a recent movie called Sunday Best, which showcased all the black people that were on the Ed Sullivan program. So anyway, what happened was, Now in 1964, there were some good things that happened, 64 and 65. The good news was the FCC passed a law that all television sets in America had to have both VHF and UHF. Back in the olden days, if you wanted UHF on your TV, you actually had to go to your local TV repairman and put an expensive converter put on. That was not cheap. That was why people were, that's why TV stations did not want to be on UHF. It all had to be VHF, 2 through 13. And then what happened, but then because of this new law, televisions had to have a built-in UHF converter, so that way more TV stations could sign on and it would help fix the secondary affiliation problems. And it happened, and then in 65, Birmingham welcomed a new TV station, and that station was WBMG Channel 42. So here was the good. So here's what happened. The owners of the station asked CBS if they could be an affiliate. And this is what CBS responded with. Yes and no. No, you can't be CBS full-time because your signal sucks. And yes, here's the payout. So this is what we'll do. So both CBS and NBC went to Channel 42 and said, we'll go ahead and we'll give you all the shows that were turned down by 13. And some of the shows are actually winners. Ed Sullivan, Cronkite, and Carson. So 42 became the affiliate of all those shows locally in Birmingham. They loved the idea, but here was the problem. For years, in a market where there were one or two VHF stations and one UHF station, that's what happened. They were throwaways. The UHF stations were throwaways. They were bullied a lot by the networks. So then the FCC decided, okay, we're going to, so this is what the FCC did. The FCC stood up and said, we're going to pass a law. And the law is called the one-to-a-market rule. So if you live in a market where there's 3 stations carrying network TV shows, what we'll do is we will put on, so if you have a station, so in Birmingham's case, there will be no more CBS and NBC on 2 stations. It was one station had to be CBS, one had to be NBC, one ABC. So in 1970, Channel 6 went ABC, Channel 13 was NBC, 42 CBS. And 42 and CBS did not get along for years and years. They were dead last in the ratings. Their newscasts were very poorly produced. They even in the 90s changed the call sign to WIAT for It's About Time. So they redid their whole news scene and it didn't matter. 42 was a piece of shit station, and of course they're owned by Nexstar, and Nexstar and CBS aren't getting along, even though they did renew the affiliations for 60 of the stations. They were like, yeah, we have a better, we have better faith in Hearst and the other company, which is Forum up in the Dakotas. So this is what we'll do. We'll go ahead and flip. So this is what they're doing in Birmingham. They are moving CBS from Channel 42 back to Channel 13, and it will be on 13.2. And 13 has always been the most consistent TV station in all of Birmingham, because Channel 6 did flip again from ABC to Fox. And ABC ended up moving to channels 33 and 40 to stations that are kind of outside the Birmingham market, but they have a low power repeater in Birmingham. And 42 will finally lose CBS after 60 years. But so now we got some fallout between ABC and Sinclair because of the infamous Jimmy Kimmel situation, of course. So this is what's going on. St. Louis, Missouri. KDNL St. Louis will be losing ABC after 30 years. KMOV, which is owned by Gray Media, will pick up ABC. So KDNL, which is owned by Sinclair, now they're going to have to figure out what the hell they're going to be doing now. KDNL has never had a successful news department. They have no news department now, and they've always been one of the lowest rated ABC affiliates in America. And, the story was ABC was originally on KTVI Channel 2. They were on Channel 2 until the 90s. Then KTVI flipped to Fox. And, of course, naturally they could have went with KPLR Channel 11, but they went WB instead. So, anyway, so that's what happened, what's going on. So that's good news. It looks like big media companies and the networks are tired of the media companies' bullshit. So they're starting to tell them, okay, we're going to go with now that we have digital media, now that all the TV stations broadcast digitally, we're going to go ahead and go with the lesser of all the evils. And Nexstar and Sinclair, two very far right-wing companies, we'll go ahead and tell you how we're going to wipe your ass. Okay. So, a little bit of a follow-up from yesterday. Come. So last week we talked about the situation with upheaval and all the sponsors of the concerts. And of course, we also talked about the fact that Poppy canceled her show at the last minute. And so here's what's going on. Poppy, I talked to my mom last week about the Canadian wildfires, and she said, she got real sick on Saturday last week. And she said that she was even running a low-grade fever, so she didn't blame Poppy at all. And I agree, so many people were spilling the haterade on her, all because Poppy wanted, she didn't want to go out at all. She sent her band out. But the band was solid. I'll give them that. Come. Yeah, I think my dog needs a drink, and there's no water. I should have brought like a cup with me. So anyway, the rest of the story was that Poppy, a lot of people were crying that Poppy wussed out and she ripped people off. And I'm like, and the other artists at the event were like, yeah, we're going to perform no matter what. But there was a big difference, and that difference was that she performed, and the story was Poppy performed, Poppy did not perform, but she was in Canada last week, the last week, and maybe that's why she got sick. I mean, these wildfires, and it's like what's sad is that Donald Trump, instead of helping the people of Canada, he bashes them by saying, we're going to tariff them. I don't know, folks. So anyway, Poppy ended up not performing, and I'm like, I forgive her. I know it. I mean, I look back at the In This Moment incident from a few years ago, and it's a totally different story. In This Moment cried that they couldn't put all their shit on stage because, it was like, I understand, this is a big festival. And, you know, they could have compromised. They could have made some deals that would benefit everybody. But no. But anyway, getting back to our story. So I talked about some of the sponsors on both Upheaval and Breakaway. And so, unfortunately, I had to mention that Coors was a big sponsor. Coors is a big evil company. Coors and, they just bought out Zoa from the investment group led by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Coors, of course, I mentioned, is a company that, oddly enough, spends a lot of money on rock-oriented events, and yet they are anti-rock and roll because they wanted to form the Parents Music. They helped to form the Parents Music Resource Center. They, they really wanted, they helped to support the Liberty, the Heritage Foundation and all that shit. These people are anti-First Amendment. But hey, if you get lonely and depressed, there's that big old can of Coors. You can drink a whole 6-pack of them and you'll be a little bit happier. I couldn't believe how many crushed Coors cans that were on the ground at that festival. So anyway, so getting back, so what happened next was that now the good news is Breakaway is so far the only right-wing sponsor of Breakaway, that's a sister concert series, is Tito's. Tito's is a very popular vodka brand, but they're based in Texas. But I also mentioned that Celsius is a sponsor. Celsius does not give to politics. As a matter of fact, they now own Rockstar Energy Drinks, which of course was started by the son of right-wing asshole talk radio host Michael Savage. Russell Golden Cloud Wiener. That's his name. And then you have, so then you have Garage. Garage is actually owned by the Kelsey brothers and a private equity firm. And Beatbox, which doesn't give to politics either, although I guess Shaquille O'Neal is an investor. But the one sponsor of Breakaway I am so angry at is Jimmy John's. So here's the story about Jimmy John's. Jimmy John's was founded by a kid of, a son of a rich guy. Jimmy John Lee Todd was his name. Jimmy John went to a private school where he did not do very well. So his father, the wealthy guy, told him, how about if we start a business together? They originally wanted to sell hot dogs. But then they decided, nope, we're going to do submarine sandwiches. So they got some nice, good cuts of meat from Dominic's grocery store. And started a submarine shop inside of a gas station. So there you go. But Jimmy John Jimmy John did everything. He... he built other locations. He franchised. He ended up becoming a multimillionaire. And he used some of that money to go out to Africa and do some big game hunting. He hunted everything from lions to elephants to camels. Oh my God, there's a million photos of Jimmy John and his trophies online. And I'm like, dude, you are a sick person. Shame on you. So, anyway, Jimmy John would end up selling his namesake restaurant in 2019 to a company called Roark Capital. Roark Capital is a private equity firm. And in 2021, they did one of the most disgusting and sickest things imaginable. They sent one of their people to the Capitol to protest the fact that during the Build Back Better plan, President Biden wanted to, this is what Biden did. He wanted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Guess what ended up happening instead? Roark sent a lobbyist to Capitol Hill, and they talked them out of it, saying that $15 an hour will bankrupt us. Roark Capital is worth an estimated $40 billion. This is who they own. 1-800-RADIATOR. Abra, which is a car auto body shop. Anytime Fitness. Arby's. Auto Training Institute. Auntie Anne's. That's the pretzel place that you see at your local shopping mall. Baskin Robbins. Buffalo Wild Wings. CarStar. Carvel Ice Cream. Cinnabon. Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. They own a minority investment in Culver's. Dave's Hot Chicken. DMG, that's, hold on a second. Divisions Maintenance Group. Driven Brands. Dunkin' Donuts. Fitness Connection. Go-To Foods. GPRS. I9 Sports. Inspire Brands, which is a holding company for a lot of these companies, including Jimmy John's. Installation Made in Easy. Jamba Juice. Jim and Nick's Barbecue. Jimmy John's. KE Camps, which is a day camp for country clubs. Mako, which is a body shop. Massage Envy. Mathnasium, which is that place that teaches kids math. McAllister's Deli. Meineke. Merry Maids. Miller's Ale House. Moe's Southwest Grill. I loved Moe's back in the day. Moe's was basically a knockoff of Chipotle and Qdoba. And then they really destroyed it. Orange Theory Fitness. Primrose Schools. Purpose Brands. Which is mostly the... non-fast food oriented businesses they have. Safe Splash Swim School, Schlotsky's Deli, School of Rock, they own the School of Rock now. Seattle's Best Coffee, Service Master, Sonic, Subway, Take 5, The Bar Method, Two Men in a Truck, U.S. Baseball Academy, U.S. Sports Camps, Uniban, which is glass repair and service centers. Waxing the City, which is, I guess they go around and wax people. Yep. And Yeb. By the way, they also used to own a lot of other places as well, including Atkins, Batteries and Bulbs, GFL, that's the waste management company. They used to own Money Mailer, it's the company that sends out coupons in the mail. Nothing Bundt Cakes, that's a place that makes cakes. They got one here in Grand Rapids. The Cheesecake Factory and Wingstop. I see a lot of ads on TV for Wingstop. So the story is that this is a company that's worth $40 billion, and they're bullying Americans by saying you don't deserve $15 an hour. I know somebody who actually works at a work-owned restaurant, and they're working with crackheads and teenagers who don't know how to wipe their own ass. And this person, by the way, is getting $14 an hour. That's what you get for paying your workers shit wages. You get shitty people. Shit wages equals shitty people. And that's who Roark is. They go after the lowest quality workers imaginable. And for the fact of the matter is, for them to send a lobbyist to our capital and say, nobody deserves $15 an hour. The minimum wage hasn't gone up to $5. Folks, it's been $7.25 an hour since 2009. Here's something that really made me sick this past week. I was watching an old clip of Ronald Reagan on YouTube. And Reagan, back in 1973, was saying that if we raise taxes on businesses, it will hurt consumers because it means inflation. Because they're going to factor in the price of the tax increase into their product. But guess what? Back in 1973, I did the math, folks. I did the research. Minimum wage was $1.60 an hour. Adjusted for inflation, $12.20. $12.20. If I was being paid minimum wage, I would rather have $12.20 versus $7.25. Back in 1973, people could buy a house for cheap. People could afford a house. People could afford to work 40 hours a week. People could afford life's necessities. They could fill a grocery cart and not break the bank. And now, 40 hours is nothing. Now you got to go out to do your gig job. Because of companies like Roark that go around and tell people like you and me, you ain't getting shit. Sorry, not sorry. We're a $1 billion company, and we'll tell you. And we don't. You know what? Most people never heard of Roark. They're a big evil corporation. Well, they're not a corporation. They're a private equity. So, needless to say, this is why I'm a little angry that Jimmy John's will sponsor. Yeah, they're actually the big sponsor of the silent disco. That's at the Breakaway. Silent disco, by the way, is where they people will wear headphones and yeah, it's kind of a cool concept. But I'm a little angry that Jimmy John's is. Most people never heard of who. Most people don't care on who owns who. But they should. And they should also figure out where the money's going to, where they support in politics. Because guess what, folks? When you go grocery shopping, when you go to a restaurant, when you go to any major business, you're voting with your money. Do your fucking research before you go somewhere. Period. And by the way, one last thing, hero of the day, Fremont Public Schools. So there were two ministries, Net Ministries and the Gideons, that were meeting up for lunch hour at school. And when parents learned that these people were throwing the religion to their kids, they said, knock it off. So now Fremont Public Schools no longer allows these people into the schools. Thank you, Fremont Public Schools. Good for you guys. Fremont is also the home of this asshole named Bill Johnson. Bill founded the American Decency Association, which went after Howard Stern for many years. He felt that people like you and me should not have the right to listen to Howard Stern because, we need to protect our children. Yeah. How about protecting our children from guns? and religious indoctrination. Okay? When I was a kid, when I was a teen, people thumped Bibles over my head because, my dad was pressured into going to New Hope Church because he wanted to change his life. He was angry at my mom for leaving him. But what do we get in the end? You guessed it. A singles ministry that indoctrinated him. And when Pastor Standfast asked everybody to give him $1.7 million to expand the church, bye! We were done. And that's what church is all about, folks. It's a business. It's all about how much money can we make. Bill Johnson, made a ton of money over the years by sitting on his ass and trashing Howard Stern. He got a lot of money from people like the Prince family. Of course, the Prince family, they gave us Betsy DeVos and Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater XE. And that's what these people are all about. It's about how much money can you give us? How much can you wipe our ass? It's not, what's sad is that they worship a man who said it's easier for a man to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And it's one of the most, folks, it breaks my heart that some of these people are trying to run this country. And they claim that Jesus is on their side of everything. But at the end of the day, they're breaking that law, and their excuse is that, well, you really got to read your Bible. Yeah. When I was thinking about what happened in Fremont, I was thinking about this guy named, I went to school in Elk Rapids, Michigan. There was a guy named Gary Gladfelter. Gary was a bus driver. And he had a church that met at my middle school, Cherryland Middle School. And his story was that so the story was, when I was in middle school, the school had magazines. And one magazine that was pulled from the rack was Mad. Why was it? Well, it turned out that Gary's daughter got mad. She was reading it, and then Gary looked over her shoulder and was disgusted. And he called up the school and says, "Get this filth away from our children." So anyway, what happened was they got rid of Mad Magazine. They basically told parents, we're sorry that, we're not going to do this again. So this is what happened. I basically said, but anyway, to make matters worse, my dad was also a bus driver, and he agreed to go to his church one Sunday. So we went. He gave out this really shitty sermon about pornography. And he claimed that pornography was destroying America, pornography this, pornography that. He was crying about days of our lives being too steamy for his children. Trixie, come. Yep, all's well.
Okay.
My dog was just...
For quite a while.
Yeah, my dog was wanting to relax and... All right.
Well, this is kind of a thing to be used and then vacated.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go. So what happened next was that... Anyway... So what happened was so this guy, Gladfelter, gave out one of the most idiotic sermons I ever heard in my life. And he was out there saying that shows like Days of Our Lives were pornographic. It was too steamy for children. So what happens is, so this loser gave out the worst sermon I ever heard in my life. I wanted I simply wanted to get the hell out of there. And that was one of the last churches I've been to. You know what, folks? It's like all the churches in northern Michigan are so pathetic. And that led me to want to basically quit going to church altogether. Yeah, it's like I've been to New Hope. I've been to churches where they yell and scream and talk in tongues. It's like that's what northern Michigan church to me is all about. How much money can you give me? How many lies can we tell you? How can we backstab you? So, anyway, what happens is at the end of the day, I quit going to church for years, and of course then I went back to church years later because my mom wanted me to get baptized. Come. Yeah, we're not going back to the bathroom. So what happened is I ended up going to this church, and I quit because she wanted me to get baptized, and unfortunately, she wanted me. What ended up happening at the end of the day was that I was dealing with people who wanted me to give them money and rides and basically wipe their ass for them. So I quit. And, I also went to another church because my mom has always been about shoving me into church. And, we went to another church, and then I learned that they did a raffle for AR-15s, and one of their youth pastors, was a pedophile. And, you see, folks, and the funny thing is, one of the safest places I've ever been to in my life, and friendliest places I've ever been to, the strip club. And, we can't have strip clubs. They're immoral. They're gross. They hurt families. They hurt our neighborhoods. And, no. Folks, I'd rather go to a strip club than a church, because I've had happier moments at strip clubs than I've ever had at church. I am tired of people who just want to make me want to live in my head rent-free and tell me that their ideas are better than my ideas because they like to march on the wrong side of history. And I am tired. I am fucking tired of people who want me to live their life. And it involves their religion. It's authoritarianism, is what they did here in Grand Rapids. It's hardcore authoritarianism. They want you to. They basically said that, well, because my God said that this is the way we're supposed to live. Well, guess what? We're a Christian nation. Yeah. I got news for you, folks. We were founded from freedom from religion. Come. My dog's trying to get back into the bathroom. Yeah, we got to get going real soon. And our car is kind of an earshot away from us. So anyway, the point is, folks, is that religion is... Folks, I'm not against religion. I'm against people who misuse religion to shove it into our face and basically force you to be their personal puppet. And, folks, this is why Grand Rapids is a very depressing city. And it's funny, I'm on several dating sites, and all the girls that want to meet me aren't from Grand Rapids. They're all from, Lansing. One girl I'm chatting with right now, she's in Lansing. There is one girl from Grand Rapids that I've been talking with, but she's a pen pal. And her excuse is that, well, I was sexually assaulted, so I really want to get to know you first. To me, it basically says I never want to meet you. You see, this is why, folks, I'm not a fan of religion. I've actually prayed to God back when I was a more holier man to get me a woman if you really cared about me. And it never happened. Instead I ended up, the good news is I got a house. I'm driving a car that's not 10 years old and breaks down every 5 minutes, which is brilliant. But unfortunately, tragically, and unfortunately, I live with my dad. And my father, unfortunately, just this morning alone, he bullied me a few times by saying that I eat too much because I made myself a little omelet. Hell, he did the same thing yesterday because I told him I went to Chipotle for lunch because I worked 55 hours this week. I have the right to treat myself. And my father would always tell me, son, you're too big, you're too fat. I watch my calories. And here he is, eating cookies and pies and cakes, and he's diabetic. And this morning, I was watching CBS Sunday Morning, and they did a story on, so back to back, they did stories on, they did a story on a black painter. And then after that, they did a story on Corinne Bailey Ray. Come. Who had that hit song 20 years ago, Put Your Records On. And he got angry because there were too many black people on there. It's like, you know what, man? Mentally, I was like, well, you know what, man? I have to put up with your bullshit because Trump's politics don't make any sense, and you don't mind being his puppet. Me, on the other hand, I never voted Republican, and I'm definitely against corporate Democrats because they don't care about us. This is why folks, when I moved to Grand Rapids, there was that part of me that says I should have discontinued this website and just let go static. But I will not be censored. I will not be censored no matter how hard people try. And guess what? If you don't like me, just turn me off. Fine. I'm good with that. And the sad truth is, you see, folks, I'm happy. I get angry, I do get angry when kids are forced into Jesus stuff. And by the way, I should go back to Gary Gladfelter in Mad Magazine. Gary Gladfelter, by the way, passed away a few years ago. And guess what he died from? COVID. He refused to get the shot. Yeah. So he ended up on a ventilator and died. Whoop, womp, womp. So there you go, folks. You kiss the wrong ass, and that's what you're gonna get. And all I have to say about that is, folks, I'd rather read a Mad magazine than to read a Bible that was heavily censored because of the Cold War. Oh, God hates gays because we said so. Even though there's no word in Greek for homosexuality. Well, they put it in there. Whatever. But anyway, bravo to the city of Fremont and their public schools. Keep that shit away from our kids. Period. End of story. All right, my dog is thirsty. I gotta get her going. I gotta get going. I need to shut up and enjoy my Sunday, or what's left of it. Good day and good luck. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye-bye.